Before we dive in, make sure you subscribe to the channel, hit the like button, turn on the notification bell, and leave a comment below. Your support keeps these real stories alive and helps us bring more raw, unforgettable moments to light. And if this story touches you even a little, share it. Someone out there might need to hear it too. They told me healing would be slow, predictable, logical. But they were wrong. Sometimes, healing crashes into your life in the messiest, most unexpected ways, like when a stranger offers you a room and, without warning, hands you back a piece of yourself you didn't even realize you'd lost. That's exactly what happened to me. And trust me, the surprise I got was nothing like what I thought I was walking into. I used to believe you had to build walls to survive. Stay safe. Stay hidden. But what if I told you that sometimes the walls we build are the very reason we feel so alone? What if the safest thing isn't isolation, but surrender? The night I accepted that key, I didn't just open a door to a room. I unlocked something buried deep inside of me. And the chain reaction it triggered? It changed everything. If you've ever felt lost, tired of carrying yourself alone, or convinced that peace is just another empty promise, stay with me. Because what happened next will challenge what you believe about belonging, healing, and the quiet, unseen miracles waiting for you when you finally dare to step inside. I arrived with my heart heavy, expecting silence to be my only companion. You know that kind of silence, thick, almost like a blanket you pull over yourself when you're tired of the world? That's what I was ready for. But the moment I stepped through the door, it was as if the air itself was alive. Laughter floated from somewhere down the hall. The smell of something warm and sweet drifted from the kitchen, and voices, unfamiliar yet oddly welcoming, bounced off the old wooden walls. It hit me. Maybe I wasn't as alone as I thought. At first, my instincts screamed to retreat. Solitude was supposed to be my shield, my safe harbor. And yet, standing there with my suitcase still in hand, I felt a strange pull to stay rooted. It's funny, isn't it? Sometimes the very thing we think we need, being alone, isn't what we need at all. Life, in its quiet wisdom, had placed me exactly where human connection was unavoidable. I didn't know it yet, but this would become the first spark of something bigger, a realignment I didn't even know my soul was craving. I moved deeper into the house, and every step felt like peeling back a layer of old armor. The cluttered living room, with shoes kicked carelessly by the door and throw blankets half slipped from couches, whispered a different kind of welcome, one not polished or rehearsed, but real. I had expected sterile order and got chaotic warmth instead. It was as if the house itself, like an old friend, was saying, "Come as you are." And maybe for the first time in a long while, I was willing to listen. What I didn't realize as I placed my bag down with a shaky breath was that this unexpected buzz of life would become a rhythm I couldn't help but follow. The hum of background chatter, the occasional clatter of dishes, the careless music leaking from an old radio, all of it stitched into me a quiet curiosity. Maybe solitude wasn't the destination I needed after all. Maybe there was something better waiting if I just stayed open for a little while longer. I woke up the next morning to the smell of coffee sneaking through the cracks of my door. No loud voices, no chaos, just the simple, steady rhythm of life moving without force. I padded barefoot to the kitchen, drawn by the quiet invitation. There, in the soft light, sat a few others, silent, wrapped in their own thoughts, sharing the space without demanding anything from each other. It felt like stepping into a living version of peace, something real, something earned. There was no need for grand introductions or nervous chatter. Someone handed me a cup of coffee with a knowing smile, and that was enough. In that moment, I realized sometimes comfort doesn't come from big gestures or perfect words. It comes from presence. From someone sitting beside you without trying to fix you. That morning taught me a truth few people talk about. Healing often begins in the spaces where words are optional and understanding is felt rather than spoken. I settled into a chair by the window, feeling the warmth of the mug seep into my hands. The house around me creaked with the soft noises of life. Someone flipping pages in a book, another clinking a spoon against a cup. It reminded me of those rare days growing up when the whole family would be together, yet no one felt the need to fill the air with noise. I had forgotten how deeply comforting quiet could be when it's shared with others who simply get it. And as I stared out at the slow, golden morning, it hit me that perhaps the greatest luxury isn't solitude or noise, it's peaceful togetherness. This kind of quiet, where nothing is demanded and everything is accepted, was stitching something back together inside me. I didn't know it yet, but these small, wordless moments would become the foundation for something even deeper. As the day wore on, I found myself wandering through the house, letting my fingers trail across the worn edges of furniture and the chipped corners of doorways. Every detail, the slightly crooked picture frames, the jackets slung carelessly over chairs, the half-empty glasses forgotten on end tables, spoke of lives being lived in raw, unapologetic authenticity. It was nothing like the pristine, curated spaces I was used to seeing. Here, mess wasn't failure. It was proof of belonging, of being alive. I paused by the dining table, still cluttered with the remnants of last night's dinner, crumpled napkins, a nearly empty bottle of wine, a half-eaten loaf of bread. In another life, I might have seen this as careless or chaotic. But standing there now, it felt strangely beautiful. It whispered of laughter shared, of conversations that ran too long into the night, of people choosing each other over perfection. I realized then that sometimes the most vibrant emotions leave behind the biggest, messiest footprints, and that's something to be treasured, not hidden. Walking into the living room, I caught sight of an open window letting the breeze shuffle the papers on a cluttered desk. The sunlight caught dust motes dancing lazily in the air, and in that small, forgotten corner, it struck me. Spaces, just like people, where there's stories openly if you know how to look. Every scuff on the floor, every threadbare pillow, was a reminder that life was not meant to be sterile. It was meant to be felt, deeply and messily. And somehow, standing there, I felt a little less afraid of my own imperfections. The house, with all its flaws and heartbeats etched into its bones, mirrored the slow shift happening inside me. I had come seeking distance, neatness, a clean slate, but what I was finding instead was the messy, glorious truth of connection and presence. And little did I know, the deeper I leaned into this imperfection, the closer I would get to discovering the kind of healing that no empty room could ever offer. Later that evening, I found myself sitting on the back porch, an old quilt thrown over my knees, the night air cool against my skin. Someone else sat a few feet away, neither of us speaking, neither of us needing to. It's funny how silence between strangers can feel awkward, but silence between kindred spirits feels like a conversation all its own. In that moment, there were no expectations, no awkward glances, just the simple, shared experience of existing together without judgment. I watched as they absent-mindedly tapped their mug against their knee, a slow, rhythmic sound that somehow matched the steady hum of the crickets in the background. It reminded me of those rare, Precious friendships where you can sit for hours without saying a word and still walk away feeling deeply seen. This wasn't about dazzling conversation or cleverness. It was about presence. The kind of presence that says, I see you. I'm here. You're enough. As the stars pushed through the velvet sky, I felt a part of myself relax that I hadn't even realized was clenched tight. I didn't need to prove anything here. I didn't need to explain the cracks and bruises I'd accumulated along the way. There's a certain healing that happens not through words, but through being quietly witnessed. And maybe that's one of the secrets they don't tell you. Sometimes the deepest connections are the ones built in the quiet spaces between words. That night, as the coolness deepened and the porch light cast long shadows across the floor, I realized that real understanding doesn't demand explanations or grand gestures. It just shows up and stays. And without knowing it, this silent companionship was gently laying the groundwork for an even deeper shift that was waiting for me just around the corner. The next morning, I woke up to a kind of stillness that didn't feel empty. It felt full somehow. Golden light poured through the thin curtains, stretching lazy fingers across the worn wooden floor. The house seemed to hum quietly, as if even it were savoring the peace. I wrapped a sweater around myself and wandered into the kitchen, where the coffee pot gurgled its soft, comforting song. No one rushed. No one filled the air with needless noise. It was a kind of sacred ordinary. I poured myself a cup and sat by the window, cradling the mug between my hands, feeling the gentle heat seep into my bones. Outside, the trees whispered to each other, stirred by a barely there breeze. And inside me, something began to whisper too, a sense that maybe, just maybe, this simple, unremarkable morning was exactly the kind of miracle I had been missing. In a world that screams for more, faster, louder, there was a rare beauty in just being. As I sat there, I thought about all the mornings I had rushed through before, half present, half dreaming, always chasing something just out of reach. How many moments had I bulldozed through without noticing their quiet grace? It's strange how easy it is to mistake noise for life and silence for absence. But here, in this sleepy house with its unhurried heartbeat, I was learning that life often blooms most beautifully in the soft, overlooked spaces. I didn't realize it then, but that morning was teaching me something profound. The life I was so desperate to find wasn't waiting somewhere far off. It was right here, in the creak of the floorboards, in the steam rising from my coffee, in the slow, rhythmic beat of a house that had learned how to love the simple things. And as the sun climbed higher, painting the world in deeper gold, another invitation, an unexpected one, was quietly making its way toward me. It happened so simply that I almost missed it. As I was rinsing my coffee cup, someone leaned casually against the counter and said, almost offhandedly, "You know, you're welcome to stay as long as you want. No pressure." They said it like it was nothing, but to me, it was everything. That invitation cracked something open inside me, a space that had long been boarded up by fear, self-doubt, and the belief that belonging was something I had to earn. I nodded, pretending it was no big deal, but inside, emotions tangled and collided like waves against a breakwater. It's wild how just a few words, spoken without expectation, can shift your entire view of yourself. They weren't asking me to fit into their lives perfectly, or to perform some version of myself that wasn't real. They were offering something radical, a chance to simply exist and be enough. Growing up, I had learned that love and acceptance often came with strings attached. Be good enough, be quiet enough, be useful enough, and maybe you'd be allowed to stay. But here, in this messy, lived-in house, surrounded by people who barely knew me, the rules were different. No games. No unspoken contracts. Just a door left open, an extra place at the table, a bed made up with clean sheets. And something in me, weary and battered, wanted so badly to step fully into that offer. I didn't have the words yet to say it out loud, but in my heart, a decision was taking shape. Maybe staying didn't have to mean losing myself. Maybe belonging wasn't about shrinking to fit, it was about expanding to be seen. And as the afternoon sunlight spilled across the kitchen floor, so too did a quiet resolve to say yes, to stop running. And as I sat there, cup in hand, I had no idea that the simple act of saying yes would soon lead me to reclaim parts of myself I thought were long gone. That evening, as laughter floated from the living room and soft music threaded through the house, I stood in front of the small wardrobe in my room, staring at the clothes I had hastily packed. I reached for a dress I hadn't worn in ages, the one that made me feel like me, not the polished, muted version I had learned to present to the world. Slipping it over my head felt like shedding a skin I had worn for too long. It wasn't about impressing anyone. It was about remembering myself. I smoothed the fabric over my hips and caught my reflection in the mirror. The person staring back at me looked lighter. Not in the way of someone who's running from their pain, but someone who's finally stopped apologizing for carrying it. It's a strange thing, reclaiming parts of yourself you'd almost forgotten existed. Like finding an old photo and realizing you were beautiful even when you couldn't see it back then. Tonight wasn't about transformation. It was about returning. As I fastened the small necklace around my neck, one I hadn't worn in years, I thought about how often we armor ourselves in invisibility, thinking it'll protect us. We hide in muted colors, careful words, rehearsed smiles. But here, tonight, in this house that asked nothing of me but my presence, I found the courage to be seen again. Not dazzling, not perfect, just real. And somehow, real felt more beautiful than perfect ever had. With a slow breath, I stepped out of the room, feeling a mix of nervousness and excitement. I didn't know what the night would bring, who would notice, or if anyone even would. But that wasn't the point. The act of dressing up, of showing up, was a quiet declaration to myself. I'm still here. I still matter. And with every step down the creaky hallway, I moved closer to something new that was already waiting in the next room. When I stepped into the living room, the scene was already unfolding in that easy, unforced way that real moments often do. New faces had arrived, friends of friends, neighbors maybe, but there was no grand announcement, no need for staged introductions. People drifted into conversation like rivers finding their natural course, and somehow, without even realizing it, I was already part of the current. There's a magic to spaces that welcome you without making a spectacle of your arrival. I perched on the edge of the worn-out couch, a drink cradled between my palms, and let the room wash over me. Someone was recounting a funny story, another person was strumming a guitar softly in the background, and everywhere there was a quiet comfort, a sense that nobody here was trying too hard. It reminded me of the best kind of childhood afternoons, where you could just be without needing to perform or impress. And sitting there, I realized, beginnings don't always announce themselves with fireworks. Sometimes they slip in, gentle and unnoticed. The longer I stayed, the more the tension in my chest loosened, like a tightly wound knot finally easing. I laughed when something was funny. I chimed in when I had something to say. But there was no pressure to be brilliant, No invisible scoreboard keeping tally of my worth. It was the kind of environment that teaches you something vital. That connection isn't a test to pass. It's a field you're simply invited to step into, at your own pace. As the evening wore on, and the glow of the room softened into something even warmer, I began to sense that something was shifting. Not just around me, but within me. A reawakening, a remembering. And little did I know, the quiet, almost accidental bonds forming in that room were about to weave themselves into something much deeper than casual company. As the night mellowed and conversations thinned into soft murmurs, I found myself again drawn to the edges, to a quiet corner where the noise dissolved into something more sacred. There, a few others sat together, not speaking, just sharing the same pool of silence. I slipped into an empty chair, no words offered, no words needed. And strangely, it didn't feel lonely at all. It felt connected, like we were all breathing from the same gentle rhythm. I looked around and caught small moments that spoke louder than any conversation. A hand lightly brushing another's shoulder, a shared smile exchanged over a sip of wine, a sigh that everyone seemed to understand without explanation. This was intimacy in its purest form, the kind you can't manufacture, the kind that simply grows when you trust stillness to do the speaking. It reminded me of those rare instances in life when you realize that being seen has very little to do with being heard. Sitting there, I thought about how often we fill spaces with noise out of fear. Fear of being misunderstood, of being forgotten. But here, in this shared hush, there was no fear. Just the easy, profound acceptance that sometimes presence is the greatest offering you can give. No performance, no polished mask. Just showing up, breathing the same air, letting the moment stitch you quietly into the lives around you. And as I leaned back, letting the hum of the house settle into my bones, I realized something vital. True connection doesn't scream for attention. It hums quietly beneath the surface, patient and sure. It was in that shared silence that I finally began to believe that belonging wasn't something I had to chase. It was something I could simply allow. And even deeper than that, another realization was quietly taking root, waiting to surface in the days to come. On my last morning there, I lingered longer over my coffee, feeling the weight of something new and unexpected settle into my chest. It wasn't sadness, exactly. It was something more tender, like gratitude wrapped in a soft kind of ache. Around me, the house was quietly alive again. Footsteps overhead, the low clatter of breakfast dishes, the muted laughter of people who had already woven me into their morning without even thinking about it. I realized I didn't need a grand farewell. Some endings are softer. Some are simply understood. As I packed my things, I thought about all the places I had tried to find belonging before. Loud places, polished places, places that demanded a version of me I didn't even recognize. None of them felt as real as this mismatched house filled with imperfect, welcoming souls. It wasn't perfection that made me feel at home. It was permission. Permission to be messy, to be unfinished, to be fully, gloriously human. And that, I knew, was a rare kind of gift. Standing at the door with my bag slung over my shoulder, someone squeezed my hand lightly. A simple gesture, but it said everything words couldn't. "Come back anytime," they said with a smile that asked for nothing in return. I nodded, feeling that familiar sting behind my eyes, the kind that comes when something true touches a part of you long neglected. I knew then that I wasn't leaving empty-handed. I was carrying something precious with me, the quiet, unshakable proof that I could belong without bending myself out of shape. As I stepped out into the crisp morning air, the world felt a little wider, a little warmer, a little more possible. And though my steps took me away from that house, my heart carried its music with me. A soft, steady hum reminding me that sometimes the spaces that ask the least from us are the ones that give the most. And that realization was only the beginning of a much bigger journey that lay ahead. So now I have to ask you, where have you been building walls, thinking you were protecting yourself, when in reality, you were just keeping life out? What doors have you been too afraid to walk through, fearing what surprise might be waiting on the other side? Maybe today is the day to stop hiding, to stop waiting for the perfect moment, and realize that sometimes the most imperfect invitations lead to the most beautiful chapters of your life. You don't need to have everything figured out. You just need the courage to say yes, even when it feels terrifying. Tell me in the comments, what's one thing you've been afraid to accept, but deep down, you know could change everything? I read every single comment, and your story might be exactly what someone else needs to hear to find their own strength. And hey, don't forget, subscribe to the channel, hit the like button, turn on the notification bell, and share this video with someone who might need a little nudge to open their own door. You are not alone. And sometimes, the biggest transformations start with the smallest, quietest yes.